Welcome to A Voice from the Hills. I'm James Warner, co-founder of Silicon Hills Wealth Management here in Austin, Texas. Our guest on today's podcast is Joelle Boneparth. She goes by the handle Average Joelle on social media, but I think you'll agree after this podcast that she's anything but. Like many accomplished women in today's society, she juggles the roles of mother, spouse, and executive with the responsibilities to her community, society, and herself. Joelle is an author, brand builder, and the publisher of Our Tiny Rebellions, one of the coolest things to come from the pandemic. Today, we're going to talk fear, expectations, boundaries, taking risk, partnership, and what it takes to feel truly accomplished. So let's get to it.
James Warner is the founding partner of Silicon Hills Wealth Management. All opinions expressed by James, his co-host, and guest are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Silicon Hills Wealth Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of Silicon Hills Wealth Management may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.
And Joelle, thank you for joining us. Just to kind of set the stage for everybody, you're a mother of two, you're general counsel for a Fortune 100 company. You're an author, maybe an unrecognized brand builder. And then you've got this awesome little thing called Tiny Rebellions that you started during the pandemic. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you missed anything. I wear a lot of hats, and you've mentioned all of them. So yeah, hi.
It's how's it like wearing those hats in the last 18 months? What's been different?
A lot has been different. There is really there is no boundary between one and the next. I would say that is probably the biggest change that we've experienced since the pandemic that changed everything. I mean, I wear many of those hats at the same time every day, and there is no day and there is no night. There is just, awake and asleep, working and not. I mean, but they really all blend together every single day. And I wouldn't, honestly though, I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's been a journey, but I think through it, I have been forced to really look hard at my priorities and find, things that matter most to me and put those at the top of the list and really learn how to juggle them.
And when I was prepping for our podcast, I was thinking that, just because of the location that you guys are in, I mean, you were really on the front lines of COVID in the U.S.
We were. I mean, so just for some backstory here, we took our daughter, our older daughter now, Hazel, who's now 6, for her 4th birthday. We promised her a trip to Disney World, which we had scheduled for January 2020. She came down with the flu, or what we think is the flu. I mean, who really knows now? But she came down with the flu the night before we were supposed to leave for our trip, and we had to cancel it. And it was devastating. I mean, we've all experienced a lot of disappointment over the last few years, but this was like a really big deal. It's 4-year-old's first trip to Disney World. So I rushed around like a maniac to reschedule it. And we got it rescheduled for the last week in February / the first week in March 2020. And we are watching, on the news out of China, then news out of Italy, and the first case in, I guess it was California. Then there's cases in New York, and we live in the New York City area. And our trip is inching closer and closer. And I'm like, nothing is going to prevent us from going on this trip. We cannot do this to her again. We had no idea what disappointment really was at that time, I think. But we were so adamant that we weren't going to cause our daughter any more disappointment, that we pushed through and we went to Disney World amidst the initial stages of the pandemic in the US. And by the time we returned home the second week in March, I mean, like, it almost was barely even safe to go to the office anymore.
Where it hits home.
Yeah, where it hits home, literally, where it was starting to really be in our own backyard. I mean, and for us, that was really, first weeks, March 2020. And, closed our eyes, and a day later, we were all at home with our kids, and school was closed, and we all thought it was going to be for a couple weeks, and it wasn't a couple weeks. And people around us were falling ill. I mean, it was terrifying.
Our friends that live in New York City, and and they're tough. I mean, people that live in New York City just have a toughness about them.
Yeah,
And
well,
I can really that's the first time I've seen a lot of these people just kind of shed that whole toughness and just really be vulnerable and scared. They were just
yeah,
scared.
I don't think there was any way to keep. I mean, we all try, New York tough. That's what they always say. But like people try to keep a brave face, but I think everyone in this region felt like we were trapped.
And were your kids old enough to kind of really know what was going on, or did
No,
it
no,
seem like a giant sleepover for them? What was the vibe?
yeah. I mean, at the time, my kids were 4, and my younger one had just turned 1. So they really had no idea what was going on. My 4-year-old missed being in school, but she really didn't. She really couldn't comprehend like what we were doing and why we were here. I mean, she was just kind of, just kind of maturing into the age of realizing that something was amiss. And that was really hard too. I mean, it's trying to balance truth and reality with a 4, 5, 6-year old, wanting them to understand that there's a reason why we're doing these things that seem very strange to you. But she, couldn't really comprehend. I mean, we bumped up against that a bunch of different times during the pandemic. And I think that may have been the most heartbreaking thing for me, was she really thinks, and she really thinks she understands what's going on, but it's so much more complicated than even the ways that we try and oversimplify and explain it to a young child. She would say things that like, well, why can't I do X, Y, Z? I promise I'll wear my mask,
Right.
because up here, that's, most people still wear their masks, a lot more than probably in other areas in the country. And she would say that, and I'm like, well, that's not, I know you think that you're doing everything right, sweetie, but it's not as simple as that. And so it's hard to brush up against that disappointment and to try and explain things to her in terms that she would understand and that are appropriate. So I mean, it was tough to balance truth, but also shelter her from some of the scary stuff that we were feeling and experiencing. I mean, we you have to hide it. We had to hide it. It was tough.
Yeah. And so was it when you were pregnant with Hazel that you co-wrote the book, The Millennial Fix?
Yes, the
So
millennial
be honest
money.
with me. How much of that did you write? 100%, 90%? What was the co-authorship?
Oh, it's I won't throw Douglas under the bus here. Doug and I worked together in a very interesting way. So we had this idea for the millennial money fix when I guess when I first got pregnant with Hazel. And we kind of, Doug and I don't have an off button. We go all the time. We're always batting ideas back and forth. We debate issues till we fall asleep at night. It's just who we are. So we came up with this idea and we just started working through the thesis of like, well, what could we do? What is the problem for millennials? Like, what are the problems that we face and why do we face them? And what, uh, are there some constructs we can put together to help them find financial freedom? And so we started just talking through these ideas. I mean, God, over over the course of my whole pregnancy, and we started drafting a couple chapters of the book. We sold the book, and the timing worked out pretty well that we spent most of my maternity leave drafting the book. And he's more of an ideas guy, and I'm more of an.
Well, his ideas are all throughout there, but
Yeah, I mean, look,
anybody
he's
who's
the
read your
finance
writing
guy.
and then read that book goes, "Oh, okay, I get it."
Yeah, no, he's definitely the numbers guy, the finance guy with all the substance, but I'm the person with the stories, and that's how we operate, and that's why we're such a good team.
But in the book, you talk about the idea of 9 to 5, especially for millennials, being kind of an outdated, almost laughable concept.
Yeah.
And you talk about the concept of mastering the art of multitasking, and
Yes.
also being more fluent with technology, so you never truly have an off button.
Well, and you know what the interesting thing is too, our book is kind of like a bit of a time capsule, right? Because it was published before the pandemic. So now I think a lot of folks who or upper management, older generations and upper management who were resistant to those changes were kind of like forced into them, right? Over the last 2 years of saying, well, I may not necessarily trust my team to
Yeah.
work from home and to get things done according to whenever they feel like it, but they don't really have a choice. I mean,
Yeah, they could have
of
just sent a note home saying I'm sorry, but you have to be a millennial now.
I mean, it's
There's no
kind of
option.
well, I mean, but that was a kind of always that was always the school of thought that I subscribed to, and I'm sure that which is interesting because I've always kind of had these corporate jobs by day, and I've always worked on my passion projects and assisted Doug on with his projects at night. But my whole thing has always been like, it doesn't have to be like this. If someone can act efficiently and they can get their job done, they shouldn't be punished for finishing. You know, finishing early or for working at non-traditional times. I mean, people should get to work when they uh, have the capacity and at the speed at which they can do it. And as long as the work's getting done, what is the concept of FaceTime anyway? I think that letting go of that. I mean, and we did talk about that in the book. I mean, letting go of that, uh, it also in a sense supports women. It supports women in their advancement in the workplace because we were always the first to lose when people were looking around at 7 or 8 o'clock at night at the law firms that I worked at, and there were no working mothers sitting there anymore. It wasn't because we were working less hard. It was because we had other obligations outside of the office. I mean,
And it could have
I,
also meant you were already done.
well, right. Well, that was the thing. Like I would always lament about that. I would say, I sit here all day and I like pump through my to-do list because I know that I have to leave at 4:30 because that's when pickup, for me to sit in traffic because New York City area, to sit in traffic for 90 minutes to get home, and I want to see my kids before they go to bed. Um, I have to be out of here at the same minute every day. I mean, I was just wildly efficient with my time in the office when everybody else was, you know,
So even though
wheeling and
that
dealing around.
9 to 5 mindset from a millennial standpoint may be outdated, there were still the corporations that we work for that
Yep.
were hard and fast all over it, right? And our
Yes.
commuting and everything was set to
It,
that
just this,
speedometer, right?
yeah, I mean, and the sooner and the more people embraced and let go of the more people embrace the idea that work can get done anywhere and at whatever time is appropriate, and whatever time that your worker can feel the most successful or can be the most productive. Like, we should embrace that generally because there's a level of trust that's conferred with that, right? I mean, we're saying that we trust you to get it done, in the time in which you can get it done. I mean, of course, there's exceptions to that. I mean, I take, I have a lot of conference calls as part of my day job. I mean, and I accept that, those get scheduled at times that are most convenient for everybody. But when it comes to my actual, some actual work that I have to do, I mean, I do it when I can. Sometimes I have to stop working at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I log back in at 8 o'clock at night if I have to. I'll do what I have to do, and I don't think no one really ever gives me a hard time. I mean, I'm very fortunate to work for a company that really supports people getting their job done whenever they need to get it done. And as long as the work's getting done and the work product is good, no one's going to give me a hard time. But that's why women can succeed at my company and companies like mine.
Well, and I think employers by and large have been pleasantly surprised by work from home. I think they've seen
Right.
productivity numbers they didn't expect. I think they've seen loyalty that they might have not trusted to begin with. So I don't think there's any doubt that work from home is working for the employer, but how does work from home work for the home?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I wrote about this in our Tiny Rebellions, I guess a couple months ago, where I wrote about it in the context of doing laundry because I work in my office is in my basement. It was never intended to be an office. It's kind of like a nook off my children's playroom. And we also have a little laundry room down here. So I would hear the laundry machine going all day. while I'm working. And I'm like, I'm a neat freak. I can't help it. It's just who I am. Like my well-being like rests on being clean. It's just like, it's a personality trait. So I would hear it going, and I would just felt like I was constantly doing laundry. Like I was doing laundry on conference calls. I was I was folding, flipping constantly every day. And I'm like physically laboring while I'm mentally laboring, like all day. Like why am I doing this to myself? And so at a certain point, I set a rule. And I decided, and I know this sounds like a little antiquated in the context of laundry, and I don't mean to like set my gender back and
Oh, no.
using laundry.
Boundaries are important, especially when it comes to laundry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to like, but you know what I mean. I don't mean to like set my gender back by using the example of laundry, but it's actually true. Um, I only do laundry one day a week now. I don't care if that means that it's piling over until that day. I do it one day and I push through. Because I need to know mentally that those other days I am able to push that to the bottom of my list and have it not be something that even runs through my mind. Not only because of my work, but because I want to prioritize things that actually matter to me. I want to have time to go for my runs. I want to have time to write. I want to have time to do anything that I want to do when I'm not working, and not immediately jump back into, okay, just because I now work from home doesn't mean that I am like a constant captive audience to the stress that comes with being in my house all the time. I had to find a way to set those boundaries. And, it does
And
come
you
from
probably
you.
had to find a way not to look at the laundry too, right?
Literally, yeah. Literally not to look at it, but also just to say,
Did they have to lock you out of the room and not give you the
no,
key until that one day?
no, I'm just like a scheduling person. So if I tell myself that I'm going to do something one day a week, I'm like a scheduling and a list woman. So if it is like not on my list, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put it out of my mind. And that's really what I did. I said, okay, we're going to put this on Sundays, or we're going to put this on Mondays. And I just know that just only one day a week am I going to allow myself um, to be mentally or physically saddled by that one obligation. Because if we don't try and set some sort of boundaries, yeah, this work from home thing is really great, and there's like a lot that's come out of it. But you can end up being really hard on yourself, because when you have in some way you have all the time and no time, right?
Mhm.
To do everything now. It's all the time and it's no time. I mean, there are times when I'm saying to myself, I have something for work that I got 60 or 70% done. And when I used to commute to my office, I would leave. And if I didn't get it done, I would say, I'll finish it tomorrow when I come back to my office. Now, if I'm 60% done and my kids come home from school, sometimes I say, well, I'll just finish after they go to bed and I'll log back in. That's not always healthy either, right? I mean, it shouldn't, I shouldn't do that certainly if something is,
Well,
um,
there's an argument to be made that if you're never truly off, it does make it hard to ever be truly on as well. I mean,
think
truly present. And that's one of the things that I see in the multitasking world. Our employees, our friends, everybody that we work, it seems like the better they are at multitasking, the harder it is for them to be truly present.
right. I think that there's definitely truth to that, which is why I say like it does require like a lot of mental fortitude to set those boundaries for yourself, and to say like, yeah, just because I can do something whenever I want doesn't mean that I should. And I think that as women and as like working professional mothers, we really, really can struggle with that, because there's never not something to do on our list. There is always something on the list, and it requires, you know, like constant self-assessment to say to yourself, how am I doing in all of this? Like, am I okay? Am I okay? Nothing on this list belongs to me. There's a list with 30 things that belong to my kid, my husband, my house. Where are the things that belong to me? And that's kind of that's where our tiny rebellions came from, actually.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, but let's take a step back. So you're an only child, and you You
I
referred to
am.
it as with all the performance expectations and achievement monitoring that comes with it. I think
Yep.
something like that.
I think that's accurate.
Uh, Give me an idea what that was like. What is that? When you look back on your memories of your childhood, what that
You know,
was a pretty interesting picture you painted.
I'm an only child and I'm an only grandchild on both sides of my family, which is very interesting. I think that people worry about me. People worried about me a lot because when you're kind of like the only hope, the only dream, the only legacy. I mean, think about it like that. I mean, there's a
So you
lot of
spent a lot of time in your early childhood with people just staring at you.
yeah, well, and people being afraid, like, don't let her ride the bike. Don't let her, she might fall. Is she eating enough? Like, is she? I was definitely like plumped up like a goose. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, what's going on with her? Is she okay? I mean, it was there was a bit of that, a bit of that neuroses kind of in my childhood. But I
And
mean,
did you feed off that? I mean, was that a
yeah,
positive for you growing up?
well, I think that I've always been very competitive with myself and very critical, very self-critical. More so, I don't think no one in my family was really very critical of me. I think that a lot of the expectations are expectations that I set for myself. But again, like with no real benchmarks, I mean, there was really nobody else to compare myself to. I mean, it was just me. So, which for better or for worse, when I say that like I received all the attention, I mean, that was good and that was bad. I mean, I think that my parents were very, they were supportive, but they were also concerned that I would fail. You know, they wanted me to take the safe route, which was very typical of, when you look at the generations and how people raise their children based on how they were taught, and the things that they grew up and lived through. When you look at boomers saying like, well, we want you to take a safe, take the safest route, do things that are safe and responsible. And, that's kind of how I found myself in this position, of going to law school. I mean, I've always loved to write. Being a writer was my dream in life. I was a journalism major in undergrad. Um, but it was very, you know, like it was risky. It was financially risky too. I felt like,
On the
could
safe
I,
versus risky
yeah, it
pendulum,
felt,
especially with your parents concerned. I mean, law school had to seem a lot better for them than writing.
it seemed better for them than me saying I want to move to New York City and become a writer and I want to be a journalist. And I think the pay was like $18,000 a year or something at at a magazine, an entry level job. And I'm like, this is what I would make, and this is what I would need to live. And they were like, yeah, no. So then when
Well, it's cool that you found a way to do both.
well, it is, but that was the journey, right? I mean, that was the thing. So I went to law school under this, um, guise that this was the safe and responsible thing to do. And I think my parents supported that and felt that too. They said, well, that was always the line. You can always use a law degree. That was kind of like a line. Well, you don't need to necessarily practice. You can always use your law degree. And I ended up attending a very expensive law school in New York City, um, without really knowing what it meant to be a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers. I was the first, or I mean, I was the first lawyer in my immediate family. We have some cousins, but no one that really gave me a realistic idea of what it looked like on the day to day. And so I took out a lot of money of student debt, um, for a job that and a profession that I didn't really understand. And that became the basis of the millennial problem, which we explored in our book, which ultimately we attempted to solve, and ultimately inspired my husband's entire firm and uh, his whole mission statement of forming bona fide wealth, his firm, which was, millennials that were in my position, who were saddled in six figures of student loan debt and graduated during the Great Recession, forced to have this major career reckoning before we even got started. To say to ourselves, what are we even doing? What am I doing here? I thought I was making the responsible decision. And certainly
Yeah.
people were, and then suddenly people were coming to me being like, well, you should have known. How should I have known? Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
What
so
was where was the preparatory course I missed here?
yeah, I
What
mean,
did I not do?
and I had a lot of those conversations. I sat down with our financial aid officers, and take out all the money. Here are the charts of how much money people will make as as an entry level lawyer in Manhattan. And maybe that was the case before the recession slashed those jobs. I mean, maybe that was the case back then.
Well, and there's also the point where as you're growing up, you're almost raised to stand out. Everything that you do gets this just extra attention, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And then you go to
Exactly.
law school, and the first thing they tell you is, well, you really need to learn how to fit in.
That's so true.
You
That's a
really
really
need
great way
to
to look at it.
you really need to learn how to leave your individualism at the door that you've spent your entire life fostering and do things the way we do them. And that's got
You're
to be
like,
especially hard for women because all of those mores and everything were built by men to begin with.
that's so true. You must really be in my mind. It's so funny because when I was in law school, I mean, I used to write some poems, which is like random. Nobody knows that. I used to write some poems about being in law school that may or
That
may
would
not be
probably
a
get you
part of.
suspended, actually. But yeah.
But they may or
Thank
may
God
not be
nobody
a part
found them.
of a future book project I'm working on. But I wrote one that was all about reducing. It was about becoming a number because our exams, you don't put your names on exams in law school. They're blind exams. You put your number. And I basically wrote all about that, about how you are reduced to this number. It doesn't matter how hard you work, the person that you are reduced to this number for this purpose. This number will determine your success or not. And that's how I generally felt as a, as not only a law student, but as a young lawyer in the city. I mean, it just felt like there were just so many of us. It was so oversaturated. Nobody cared about my opinion. It's not your job to give opinions. It's really not your job to stand out. And that was really antithetical to who I am as a person, trying to fit into the construct of a big firm, or even a big, or even from a corporate standpoint, anywhere that really wouldn't value my opinion, um, just doesn't really necessarily align with who I am as a person. I think some people thrive in that construct of being told exactly what to do, and they can. Some people can pick things up and put them down their whole career, right? I mean,
Right.
and doesn't mean that they're a bad worker. They're a great worker, but that's just not who I am. And maybe that does stem back to being an only child and to that individualism. Um, who knows?
Well, I mean, it could, but I think there's also the idea that most of our industries and most of our larger institutions are still run, by people that are living maybe in a different generational mindset than we are.
That's
And
true.
it's just
That's very
really,
true.
it is just really hard to, to make that transition.
It's hard to make that transition when you don't let younger generations into leadership fast enough. Um, I have worked, I have not only worked for places, but I've also just been a part of so many conversations with folks in your industry and in my industry and the overlapping industries, that we're all adjacent to via Twitter and other things, where, it's one thing to say that a younger voice matters. It's another thing to let us into the room and to let us into like making decisions and actually allowing these opinions to really like guide the practices of a firm. um, it's so important, because we are your workforce now. We are the workforce. We're the predominant demographic in the workforce.
Well,
And I
in
just
many
think it's
ways, even a good employer treats their younger employees almost like your parents were treating you as an only child.
yep,
Uh,
yep. And I
let's
and
make
what's
let's
well
make
and
the
what
safe choice, and we're going to help you make it.
Right, exactly. And let's not take risks. Let's not, I mean, like opinions would be solicited from time to time, but they were thinly veiled. I mean, I can't tell you the number of meetings over the years. I mean, I've gone to meetings, I mean, and not just in my professional life, but in my, even in my life as a lay leader and volunteer in my community. I've gone to meetings where I feel like decisions were made before the meeting. where they show up to kind of advise everybody who was supposed to be part of the decision-making process of what the final decision's actually going to be. And I don't know if people think, we don't notice that, that the decision was made before the meeting or not. But that's happened to me a lot. I mean, and it's very frustrating. Not only because not only because your opinion isn't being heard, but because my time's being wasted.
Right.
If you want to say, I think that's what kills me the most. Right?
Yeah, just be honest with me. Just tell me there's 4 or 5 people that are going to make this decision, and we need a room full to justify it. But I don't need to be part of that room.
Or just say that, this is normally something we'd put before this group, but a decision had to be made quickly, and we made it. And own that. Don't try and pay lip service to people who really want to be decision makers in the room. I'd rather know that I couldn't be a decision maker on one particular issue than to be forced through an additional meeting that wastes time and also kind of like disrespects my intelligence of seeing that that's happening to me. It's
now, on the other side of respecting your intelligence, I got to congratulate you. You made the FinTwit top 50 for 2021,
which is beyond funny to me. I love it. I'm tickled.
Which A, makes me jealous beyond belief. It really does. But B, it also makes me curious. It makes me curious. It's almost like you and Doug on social media speak in this sarcastic code that is I really love it because I'm just into that.
It's how we are in real life. It's not a shtick. This is literally a day in our life. Like we speak the way we talk, the way we live. It's true. It's the real deal.
So what are the hidden messages in those? What are the hidden serious messages in those transferences of sarcasm?
I think that one of the funny things, I mean, I think one of the things that always comes through, Doug has been big on this, he's been big on crypto this year, right? I mean, he's got a lot to say on that and a lot of sarcasm around that.
Well, I think, didn't you say Bitcoin was your favorite investment?
Bitcoin is. It
okay.
is.
So, all right. So we're both on crypto here. This is great.
So Doug and I, I guess, oh my God, I really should have my timeline down, but I'm not usually the one on the other side of the mic. This is usually him, not me. I guess back in 2012, we purchased a Bitcoin miner along with a friend. This isn't just a random friend. This is probably our smartest friend, who happens to live in Austin, by the way.
Yeah, and you made reference to that in one of your Tiny Rebellion pieces, I think. Right?
Yeah, he's just a very brilliant guy. I think he's a neuroscientist and very interested in all sorts of emerging technologies. And when one day he called us and he said, "I need a couple grand. Do you want to go into a partnership with with me, and we'll buy this miner and we'll split whatever we can get out of it?" And Doug kind of said, "Well, I'll ask my wife." We had just gotten married, I think like a month. He had said, "Well, let me ask my wife," thinking that would mean that'll definitely be a no. Like he thought that was his out.
Oh, he thought you were the out.
Oh yeah, he was like, "We just got married. We have zero money. I mean, we like literally were in our entry level jobs in the city after grad school. We were like holding on by a thread to our rent." And he's like, "Let me ask my wife." And I was like, "Seth wants to do it. We're doing it." And he couldn't believe that I said that. But at the time, I think I thought to myself, I was in the first few years of a job and of a career that I didn't really know if I wanted. I was saddled in debt. I was terrified that the rest of my career was going to look exactly the way that it did back then. Doug was just getting started in his career. He was still working for another advisor and had, a handful of solid clients. And I said, we need to start taking some risks. It was almost like a boomerang effect of the way that I was raised, right?
Exactly.
Always stay in the shallow end. Always, don't stick your neck out. Put your head down and do the work, and it'll eventually work out. And in that moment, I just said, we have to start taking some risks. What is this all for if we can't take risks on something that looks exciting and that sounds like what? Digital currency? What? I said we have to do this. So we scrapped together, I think, a couple grand. I think it was like $3,000, and we invested and we mined a couple Bitcoin. And so and that was really the start of our crypto journey. I mean, it was years before the mainstream narrative blew up on it. But honestly, I'm just as excited about it today as I was back then. And for the same reasons, but even more so today. I look at the
You were
opportunities.
mining Bitcoin for $600 back then, and now it's a little bit different story.
Yeah, now it's a little different. But I'm just as excited about the entire decentralized finance space, because I just think the possibilities are just endless. Like we are still in, like, we're not even in phase one as far as I'm concerned of Web3. We're like before that. This is the pre-show. And just there's so many opportunities, especially for women too. I mean, and anyone who's willing to put in the time to really learn and see what this space is developing into. I mean, it really can be an inclusive place if you choose to put your time and energy into it, and it's exciting. So I try and play off he kind of takes the reverse psychology, right? He's always like a bit salty on Twitter about crypto, but in reality, when you actually listen to him speak about it, and when he joins Twitter Spaces and things, he's actually like, he's very gung-ho on it. But I always just try and take the counterpoint to whatever he's doing.
Your husband's kind of a master of reverse psychology, so
well, right, that's his.
Yeah, we understand that every negative comment is really just a positive recommendation.
Well,
so that's...
well, you would think that most people understand, but there's always like a couple. He gets a lot of DMs like, "How could you say this?" Blah blah. He's like, detect the sarcasm, friends. Detect the sarcasm.
Do you know me?
Yeah. But no.
All right, so let's talk about your most recent project. It is not all that recent anymore, but Tiny Rebellions. Tell us about that, and where'd you get the idea, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, sure. Our Tiny Rebellions was born from the pandemic. This was something. I mean, I've always loved to write, as you now know, and back, I guess, like about a year into all of this, I just said I need to start putting out content of my own. I've been on this financial, advice adjacent track, assisting Doug and jumping in with guest posts from time to time, but I need to have my own voice now, and really speak to an audience that I'm not seeing is being met in the space. So somewhere in, I guess it was a whole year ago this week, actually.
Yeah, I was about to say we're almost the one year anniversary.
We're at the 1 year anniversary of the event that inspired our Tiny Rebellions, which was I got my helix pierced. The helix is like, the upper part of the ear. And so my daughter got her ears pierced for her 5th birthday in the middle of the pandemic, because we didn't really know what else to do for her. She couldn't have a party. It was kind of like middle of December. And we had an appointment for her to get a pierce. And I said, you know what? I'm going to get my helix pierced. I've wanted it my entire life. I've wanted it since I was like 16. It's one of those like things where you've always wanted it, but then like my mom was like, they always get infected. Like, why would you do something like that? What if an employer sees it? What if blah blah? It's like, what if? It's so, why do you need that? You don't need it. And I kind of like
you just needed one positive nudge along the way and never got one. Huh?
Yeah, well, I was always like, like I said, I mean, I was a bit of like a nervous Nancy. I mean, I kind of like it's not safe, it's not responsible, I'm not going to do it. People have a hard time with it, whatever. And after a year of sitting in my house, working, taking care of the kids, trying to like find any like ounce of joy that I can that was like just for me, I just said, forget it. I'm going to do it. What life is too short. Why would I? It's just a hole in my ear. Like, what? Why did I say no? Why did I deny myself this tiny pleasure for so many years of my life? I'm going to do it. Why not? So I got it done.
So the hole in your ear was the first Tiny Rebellion.
It was the first Tiny Rebellion, and it was infected for 8 months. I spent like more than half of 2021 like not sleeping on the left side of my head.
My goodness.
But I have zero regrets whatsoever. I love it now. And I own it. I took a risk. I did something I wanted to do, and I owned the decision. And that is the basis for our Tiny Rebellions, which is like, we need to celebrate the tiny wins that we find in our lives. I mean, and it is for women, but it's really not just for women. It's for anyone to say, like, you are not your job. You are not only your kids. You are you. You need to find the things that make you happy and that cause you to find joy in your day to day. What else is really the point? I mean, and in doing that, you find yourself becoming a better parent, a better colleague, a better spouse. When you choose to do some things that are just for yourself, you you know, the dividends are great.
Well, I mean, I think of it as kind of a thematic stream of consciousness with, really good writing. And what attracts me to it is the writing. You write so well. It's just
Oh,
awesome.
thank you. That's so nice.
How much of this is celebrating the tiny wins and how much of it is getting your inner writer out?
I think there's, I mean, technically, right? Like our tiny rebellions itself, the newsletter itself is a tiny rebellion for me, right? Because
That's what I was thinking. Because when I
it
read
is.
it's unlike any other newsletter I've read, because it's written in a way that
It is my therapy. I
yeah.
mean, it is definitely my therapy too. I mean, they're not all happy. It's not all like I bought a new candle that smells really nice and that's my tiny rebellion for the week. I mean, I tackle
Or
the
it's
really
not
hard stuff
it's not a
too.
top 5 list to, of
No.
things you can do to rebel, or,
Although I do love a good listicle. I kind of feel like I'm due for one of those. But, generally speaking, I mean, I try and really push through the difficult things that people don't want to talk about.
so you
We
wrote about ambition in one of your posts, and it struck
Yes.
me how the word, I always think of ambition as having a positive connotation. But in your post, really, it had a negative connotation. You talked about how even the meaning had changed for you over time and circumstance. Can you
Yeah,
kind of walk
sure.
through that with the audience who might not have had the chance to read it?
As a woman, the word ambitious is kind of like there's two sides to that coin. I think from a mainstream media standpoint, you see it as like women can do anything, and here I am with my glittery sweatshirt that says, I'm an ambitious woman. I can do all these things that the men do, and I'm juggling it all, and I can do it all. It's kind of like that. I forget what it's what's that word I'm looking for? Um, oh, I forget. But it's almost not real, right? Because in the workplace, at least how I've experienced it, when people say I'm ambitious, they're not saying something nice about me. They've they've been saying that
They're saying you got to
was
watch out for her. You can't trust her.
I was not trustworthy, that I didn't care about them, right? That I was only thinking about myself, that I was selfish, and that I put my ambition above all else. Um, and I mean, I do think that is a double standard for men and women. I think that only women are associated with that negative connotation that comes with the term ambition. And that was my experience with the term, and how it was used to describe me. And I understood why the people who felt that way about me did, because that was the environment in which they came up as female lawyers and professionals in my industry. There were not a lot of us, and the women that had made it to the top didn't have anything else. All they had was their ambition. I mean, that was what they had. They gave everything
They gave
to
everything to get to that point.
they gave everything, and they were expected to give everything. So when they
And
finally reached that,
they become the living, breathing definition of that word.
correct, and when they reached that, ivory tower at the top of their field, and they look down and they see women trying to rise, they feel like they're coming for them directly. So they project that negative connotation of the word ambition upon the women beneath them. And they say, watch out for them, instead of saying, wow, we are so lucky to have this dynamic workforce filled with working women who care about their jobs and want to find a way to be successful here and be successful elsewhere. I mean, I think that will change over time, but I've experienced, the negative side of that. And I perpetuated it, and that is part of what I wrote about in that week's issue was, I did put that on other women. I did, not make fun of, but I did, push hard on other women who were like working women, working mothers who left the office early and who I felt like weren't committed and they weren't doing their part, and that I was doing all their work, and I wanted everyone to know that I was staying later than them and I picked up the slack and I was more reliable than them. I mean, I was definitely part of the problem too, because that's how I, came up. And unless
Well, I
something
think that
changes that
on
for
some
you.
levels that's just human. I just think that we require more humanity of our female employees sometimes than we do our male employees.
I think that
Uh,
that's right. I think that that's right. I mean, and for me, that changed around the time that I had my first child, but it wasn't necessarily because um, I gave birth. It's not one of those things that are like, and then I had a daughter, and it all changed, and then now I'm much softer towards my female. That is like not what happened. Uh, what what happened was the book. What happened was um, writing a book on my maternity leave and finally feeling accomplished for the first time in my actual life. Like I like objectively on paper, yeah, I had accomplished a lot. I was a lawyer. I had achieved. I'd achieved an objective measure of success. But I never felt like it was enough, and that came out like, negatively from time to time, and I just never felt satisfied.
well,
And
that
when I
that kind of leads into something else you talked about in one of your other posts. You talked about the fact that your happiness shouldn't be scrapbooked, I think is the way you put it.
I
Uh,
went, I'm trying to think what context was that I mentioned. What
and it can be practiced at any age. I think it had to do with, I think it had to do with there's no reason that someone who's 35 can't be as happy as they were at
Oh
25 or
yes,
45.
Travis Barker and Kourtney Kardashian. Yes, I was talking about the celebrity couple. Um, when right after they got engaged, and why it was so exciting to women of my generation, and a lot of that came from this notion that, like, why do we only celebrate and obsess over young couples? Why don't we allow people to celebrate and to broadcast and, prop up the love of a more seasoned couple that found love at a certain point in their life? So what? That they already have kids and they're broadcasting their, sexiness all over social media. I mean, I think it's wonderful. And that you shouldn't have to limit broadcasting your happiness to a certain point in your life. Like, I know women who say all the time, "Oh, that mom, she overshares on social media. She thinks she's posting photos of her outfits and her shoes. Who does she think she is, an influencer?" I'm like, who cares? If it makes her happy, you're looking. You know what I mean? Like, you're looking at
And
it too.
yeah, and I'm thinking, Lord, if I look like that, you'd have to buy me another
I know.
phone.
Well, I'm just laughing, and I'm like, I'm saying to myself, what after I have kids, am I only allowed to share photos of my kids? Am I not allowed to share things that make me happy, and purchases that make me happy, and things that I do with just my husband without my kids that make me happy? Um, that's
It
not
does
that's
seem like there's like a mom contract that you have to live
yeah.
up to that you didn't give a chance to sign before giving birth.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I really don't subscribe to that school of thought that, like, you should lose all of yourself um, once you have children, or that you should lose all of yourself to your job. I mean, back to that post about decentralized ambition. I mean, you have every right to broadcast whatever version of yourself that you want to at whatever age you want to do it, male or female. And I just don't subscribe to that idea at all, that you should be limited based on some sort of like social contract that says at a certain age you're not allowed to celebrate whatever in the world you want to.
Well, when you use the word subscribe, I don't know how many subscribers you have to Our Tiny Rebellions, but you should have
Never
more
enough.
because
Never
it is
enough.
fantastic. It should be required reading every week.
Oh, thank you
It's
so
really
much.
great. Now you talk one, and we got just a couple minutes left, but I wanted to get this in before we had to drop off. But you talked about the guilt of dreaming. I think is one of the things that millennials kind of suffer from. Is that still the case for you? Do you still feel that guilt of dreaming?
I don't. I mean, I think that I think if anything, you know, being constantly thinking about what is possible is what opens the doors to so many new things, right? I mean, so many new things in your own life, um, maybe a new career, maybe a new business, maybe a new way to approach your day to day with your family. Um, I don't think that you should feel guilt about that. I don't remember where I wrote that or where that came up and in what context, but I don't agree with it, and I reserve the right to change my opinion on it, which I am doing
It
now.
was probably Doug's idea that you just had to write better than he could have. But, so if I have the
No,
chance to talk to him, maybe I'll hit the dream question with him later.
I think that I mean, dreaming about what's possible and taking those risks are, I mean, like, even if at one point in time I did think that, I feel like the pandemic and what we've all been through over the last 2 years has only been a testament to, like, we have to do what we have to do the things that we dream about at night. We have to do the things that we think about in our sleep as our greatest hopes and wishes in this life. Like, we have to give them a chance because
Yeah.
life is too short.
We actually might not have the time we think we do.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what's next for you? Where are you hoping to make an impact next?
That's a great question, and you might hear more about that in the next couple weeks. But I
Ooh,
can't
so we
say
got
anything yet.
a pending
Sorry.
announcement. So I'll
Yep,
keep I'll keep the lid on it, but I will say, I'm gonna
there is some cool stuff coming, but we can totally circle back on it.
yeah, I
Um,
will be prepared to hype it up without any direct reference. So
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And then and I and I actually, I mean, look, I just, my goal for, the coming year is just to see our tiny rebellions grow. I mean, my plan is just to keep with it, and I just want to keep sharing and telling stories that relate, and that really resonate with other women. And because it's just so important, the more readers that write to me and say, um and say, I feel like you were in my mind. I was thinking that, but no one's ever said it before. Anytime that happens, I know that I've won, like on a piece, and it just makes me want to keep doing it. Anytime I'm too tired or I have something else going on, I'm like, nope, nope, we got to keep going. We have to keep going. So I'm kind of just looking forward to challenging myself and continuing to push through with that in the new year.
yeah, I was talking to somebody about how excited I was for our conversation, and they said, "Well, you're a wealth manager. What does this have to do with wealth management?" I said, "It has everything to do with it.
It
It's
has everything to do with it. It really does. I mean, because, you know, wealth management, right? Isn't it about reaching your goals? If you don't know what your goals are because you're not being truthful and honest with yourself, what are you aiming for anyway? It's not about the numbers, it's about happiness, and you only reach your happiness when you've reached your goals.
yeah, and you
See, I'm
could be,
closer to your industry than than people. I did write a finance book on it.
yeah, you did. You're the only finance author on this meeting, so you've got that going for you. All right, so last question: if you
Sure.
could go back in time and tell your teenage self one thing, what would it be? Something that would just stick and become your just
Trust.
thesis for operation.
Don't play it safe. Trust your gut. You're the one who's right, not them.
Well, that's a good one that's a good one to end it on. Joelle, thank you
Yeah.
very much for joining us,
Thank
and
you so much.
it was really great.
It's
Thanks.
such a pleasure.
And so that does it. We'll be sure to update everyone on the upcoming announcement that Joelle hinted at during the podcast. It should be coming up very shortly, and it should be very interesting. Joelle, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you so much for listening and engaging with us. What a great episode to end the year on. If you like what you hear, please rate us on your favorite podcast platform and follow and subscribe. We also bring you regular updates to our followers on Alexa via the Wealth Voice app. We'll probably have Emily Bender, who's the founder of Wealth Voice, on at some point in 2022 to talk about the power of voice. If you'd like to check these out, you can simply ask your smart speaker or Alexa-enabled device, and that actually includes the Alexa app on your phone for the latest update from Silicon Hills Wealth Management. Again, thank you so much for listening. Happy New Year.